Welcome to Concrete Conversations, the Indian Real Estate Podcast. I am Akshay.
And I'm Yash, and we're the hosts of the show. With the growing demand for e commerce and a rising consumerist culture, warehousing is emerging as one of the fastest growing verticals in Indian real estate. But what factors have enabled the growth of warehousing in India? What are some of the current trends in this market? How can retail investors make returns on warehousing assets? And how does one value a property?
To, pun intended, address this and more, we have with us today the co-founder and COO of Address Advisors, Ms. Bhavna Khetan.
Bhavna has an extensive background in real estate valuations with 9 years at Cushman & Wakefield before founding Address Advisors in 2019.
An Indian property consulting firm with global ambitions, Address Advisors has a strong presence in warehousing, commercial, and residential real estate pan-India.
Hi Bhavna, good afternoon. Nice to have you on Concrete Conversations. We know you're in Bangalore and we hope that you're enjoying the rain there.
Hi Yash, hi Akshay. Thank you so much for having me. Yes, the Bangalore rain has been a good respite to the heat and looking forward to more such rains.
Perfect. So I thought we could start this conversation by talking about your journey in real estate. And so if you could let us know how you got started in real estate and what led to you founding Address Advisors, which is your current company.
So real estate has always been my calling. I think there's no other industry I would love more than I love real estate. I actually did an internship during my college in the US in a real estate firm. And then my college placement was at Cushman & Wakefield, which is a 100-year-old New York-based firm. I learned everything that I needed to about real estate, and it has been a good founding ground for me. I did valuations for about 10 years there, consulting and valuation, and then moved on to found Address Advisors. It's been a great journey. It's been 6 years. Me and my partner, Sunny Mogra and Dipin Karania, we absolutely love what we do, and we are hoping to continue this journey further.
That's fantastic. You talked about Cushman & Wakefield. That is what we refer to in India as an IPC. And then, of course, you talked about Address Advisors, which is the company you founded. For our listeners who may not be so familiar with the terminology, could you first tell us about what an IPC is, what it actually stands for? And then maybe you could tell us about Address Advisors and the services you'll offer, what verticals of real estate you'll work in.
So IPC stands for International Property Consultants. The West has always had more years of organized real estate than India did. In the last 20 years, we've seen a lot of this industry get organized, and IPCs have played a crucial role in this because they brought in a lot of processes. They a lot of thought processes that were brought in by them helped understand how real estate has to be done in an organized manner. And plus, when organized real estate started in India, it started with commercial real estate because, you had companies from the West start operations in India for their back-end offices, right? The difference between Address Advisors and them is they are international property consultant and we are an Indian property consultant with the vision and aim of going international very soon.
That's fantastic.
So we do a segment of what they do. So we are into end-to-end brokerage services, wherein if anybody is looking at commercial office space, any client or any occupier, we help them get offices. We also have a big warehousing, industrial and land segment, which we are very excited about and have invested thoroughly in our people in this segment. Again, doing brokerage services in this. And a large part of our team is also residential, where we not only do sale, but we also do rental as an extended arm because a lot of our corporate occupiers have come back and said that they really appreciate the fact that we give them a bundled service. So these are the 3 large verticals that we have presently and in Bangalore, Chennai and Hyderabad. And very soon we are looking at adding additional verticals plus additional cities within India.
Fantastic. Since you mentioned Address Advisors is an Indian property consultant looking to go international, I thought I'd ask you, have you identified which countries you're looking to explore internationally? And also, could you tell us which ones those are?
Yes, so we had a lot of talks with counterparts in Singapore pre-COVID, but because of all the travel restrictions, we had to halt that. So Singapore is one city where we definitely want to be present,
Right.
and the other is the US. We are most likely going to look at something in New York, having like a hot desk and a team in New York, because
Wow.
we see a lot of cross-referral opportunities. We have a lot of Indian community in the US that wants to invest in India.
Right.
So therefore, we want to be there. And Singapore definitely, because it's like a huge Asian headquarters for most corporates.
Absolutely. And I'm getting really into the weeds here because I want to break it down at the start for those who may be interested in real estate but not completely familiar with the industry. What exactly, in a nutshell, if you could explain to us, is the business of property consulting as you described?
So, breaking it down into smaller parts, today, if any corporate is looking for an office space, right, they need somebody to assist them with what is the availability that's there, what are the kind of rates, what are the nuances, what they should be looking at in terms of security deposits, in terms of what are the handover condition, what is the kind of space they'll get. So that's when we as consultants come in and help clients. It's not just about showing the space and saying, this is the building, this is available, please take it.
Right.
Today, it's a lot more organized and a lot more consulting driven, because clients' businesses are very diverse, right? And today, every client comes with a very, very specific need.
Right.
So we need to understand what their need is, or we need to understand what their problem is, and then solve that problem for them. So it's more of a consulting approach to brokerage services. That's for commercial real estate.
Got it.
Similarly, for warehousing and industrial, then finally residential. I mean, today a housing is everybody's need, right?
Right.
So we help them with rentals as well. So that's in a nutshell what we do.
That makes sense.
Perfect. Since you mentioned residential real estate, I just had a little quick follow up. Since you mentioned that the other IPCs, the more international consultants, don't necessarily have a huge presence when it comes to residential real estate. Maybe is there any reason you think that why they haven't gone full on into residential real estate?
Yes, because it's a large, today 70%, 65 to 70% of the pie is residential, right? And it's a hugely fragmented market.
Right.
So it's very tough to kind of organize it and bring it under an umbrella, because entry barriers are low, right? Today, anybody can become a broker. You just need to have some connects in the society, and then you can start broking deal. Entry barriers are so low, competition is very, very high, because the local brokers also give a huge competition to organized players. It's all about supply, right? Whoever has the best supply is the leader in this market.
Right.
Because of that, I think most consultants, large consulting firms, haven't forayed into it. That's why you will see huge Indian companies that are doing really well in the residential sector. And also, every city is very different. And you don't have links between one city to another like the way you would have for a commercial or a warehousing vertical, right? So, because of that, I think it's another reason why they haven't really ventured. Rentals are a tough market to be in.
Right.
The kind of effort it's all about risk return and time effort return. So the efforts that you put in is quite similar, and the returns may not be as high for a consulting company, but things are changing. A lot has happened in the last 1.5 years. So we see a gap here, and that's the reason why we are investing a lot in this vertical.
You hit the nail on the head when you said that things are changing, and the last 1.5 years have shown a lot of change. And something interesting that you mentioned was warehousing, which I know is a point of interest for a lot of our listeners as well. So, could you tell us a little bit about the growth story of warehousing as an upcoming segment in Indian real estate? Where has this demand come from? We've been hearing a lot more about it in the last few years. So, what has the growth story of this particular segment been?
Warehousing is one of the most exciting sector that we are in, and we are so happy that we decided to venture into this. It's been a great ride so far of last 4 years for us in this segment. Lot of changes that has happened. At macro level, the government's initiatives for Make in India,
Right.
the GST initiatives, which is simplifying taxation rules. At macro levels, there have been so many changes. At the demographic level as well, right? Today, we are a consumer led economy. We are not a savings economy like how our parents had 15, 20 years back. We'd rather spend the money than we save,
Right.
which means growth because of this consumption led fundamentals that we've had. Plus, the fact that you have more of dual working households where husband and wife both are working, so you do not have as much time, and that's what has led to boom of e-commerce
Right.
and the logistics space. I mean, today you see every e-commerce company is growing, whether it's B2B or B2C. The consumption availability in tier 2 cities is amazing. So we handle South as of now, and we are hoping that we could expand into Pune and Bombay by end of this year. But we do a lot of work in Vijayawada, Vizag, Coimbatore, Madurai, Hubli, Dharwad. So I mean, today every e-commerce company wants a presence in these tier 2 cities because the demand is actually coming from here.
Interesting.
There might be some stagnation in our tier 1 towns, but tier 2 towns are seeing a huge growth.
Right.
A lot of supply chain issues have made people realize that maybe we should have companies manufactured in India itself, right? And not rely so much on other Asian countries or other European countries. So overall, it's a very, very exciting sector, and I think it is here to grow. There is no two doubts about that.
Right. I think a couple of interesting things that you've mentioned over here. The first being, of course, that we've transitioned from a savings-based economy to a consumer-led economy. The second being that when we talk about the warehousing segment, the growth has been seeing in the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, whereas tier 1 cities has kind of stagnated. I think this is especially fascinating for me and Yash because this is one of the first conversations we're having where the focus is in tier 2 cities and not tier 1 cities. But wanted to ask you, when you talk about warehousing, what are the business models of warehousing that you all work with? And then what are the kind of returns that one can consider for investors or even for other companies like y'all in that space?
Yes, so yield is a concept that is very close to my heart. Being a valuer, I absolutely love discussing yields. So, yields actually is a risk. Higher the risk, higher the return, right?
Right.
So today, office as a investment segment has kind of become risk-free because there's so many companies looking for office spaces, especially in cities like Bangalore, Bombay, or Chennai, Hyderabad. That it's a no-brainer that if you build a grade A office in a good location, it's just a matter of time before it gets rented out. COVID or no COVID, it will get rented out.
Right.
So because the risks are lower, you have a 3-year lock-in, you have a 5-year lease, renewable for another term of 5 years. You have grade A rated companies taking the space. So all of this has led to the risks coming down significantly in this sector, which means that people started looking for an alternate sector to invest because India is not used to the single digit yield. Like today you ask any investor, आपको ऑफिस से क्या yield चाहिए? They will say 10%.
Yeah.
So yields are inversely proportionate to our capital value, right? The lower the yield, the higher the capital value. So it's inversely proportionate.
Understood. And Bhavna, the other thing you touched upon was regulation and how the streamlining of the sector has actually led to the growth of warehousing in India. Could you maybe touch upon a few concrete examples of the changes that have been made in the regulations and how they have impacted the sector?
So warehousing originally, if you look at any city, is very fragmented.
Okay.
We didn't have too many organized developers in the sector, and there is individualistic ownership.
Yeah.
So when individual build, they kind of don't pay as much attention to zoning rules, or they don't pay as much attention to ground coverage.
Right.
Then there are fire norms. But now there has been two change that has happened. Earlier, the companies compromised and said, okay, I have only this as my option. So I have no choice but to take a non-compliant property. So what they would also do is get a 3PL to take it so that their risks are minimized, even though it would affect their bottom line.
Got it.
But now companies are going out and saying that no, I need a compliant property because increasing FDI into companies, right? Now, the minute you have foreign money coming in, they do not want to take any chances and risks.
Right.
They say that I will only want my investee to be in a compliant property.
Right.
So there is now a push from the companies to be in a compliant space, and now increasingly we are seeing more organized players develop warehouses.
Fair enough. You talked about tier 1 cities, tier 2 cities. Typically, warehousing, if it's not in a tier 2 city, it's still on the outskirts of a tier 1 city or in the suburbs of a tier 1 city, where FSI, floor space index regulations, aren't usually as generous as they are within the city limits. So with that in mind, wanted to ask you, how does FSI play into the way y'all finalize the location, the way y'all finalize the design and the footprint for something like warehousing?
Right. So, interestingly, FSI has a way of creeping itself into the land value.
Right.
Today, a higher FSI property will have a higher asking price, right? So, the lower FSI is already taken care into or inbuilt into my land value. So, as such, the fact that in warehousing I do not utilize full FSI is automatically taken care by the fact that the land values have to be at a certain range. And that's also one of the challenge, Akshay, that we are facing, because land prices are increasing or the expectation of land prices are higher. But at that price, I cannot build an industry or I cannot build a warehouse because a warehousing company cannot pay beyond a certain threshold.
Right.
For them, it's a cost center, right? So for them, every 50 paisa or a rupee is a lot. And these are areas, Akshay, where you actually cannot develop a residential or a office space.
Right.
So the only automatic asset class is possibly warehousing or plotted development. And in these two, any which ways, our FSI utilization is like 0.5 or 0.65 to the maximum. And that
Correct.
factors into the land prices.
Understood.
Now that we've kind of had a bit of a broad discussion about warehousing, Bhavna, I just wanted to ask you, are there any other trends that you see playing out in the future when it comes to warehousing? Whether that is, more investment coming in or the focus shifting to tier 2 cities or the ticket size kind of increasing. What do you think the future prospects are?
A lot of change is going to happen for sure. We have to move towards a more organized industry.
Right.
I think like today warehousing is at an inflection point. Like how commercial office space was about 15 years ago. 15 years ago, the supply was so thin, right?
Right.
And the quality of an asset didn't matter as much because you didn't have a choice. So I think there is going to be a big shift in the mindset where people will begin to realize that it's better to do a good, compliant property rather than doing what I did earlier. So that is one shift that we will definitely see in the future in terms of trends of, the kind of property that comes in.
Correct.
Secondly, we are seeing a push for larger integrated projects. Land acquisition is definitely a challenge here because aggregating land is not that easy. But people are now beginning to aggregate lands in areas that have potential so that you have like a 50 acre or a 100 acre
Right.
township kind of a thing where, all the infrastructures are available for a warehouse company. If they have expansion plans, it can be taken care within the same property, and you really don't have to move out and look for an additional property, because administrative costs could be really huge, right, when you have multiple warehouses. Tier 2 is definitely going to see a lot of demand for a decade at least. We are seeing that. And also in Tier 2, actually the returns are much higher. The supply is so limited that today a company, if it pays X in Bangalore, they will pay X plus 10% in Tier 2 cities. You don't have supply, you don't have a choice. You have to serve that market, so you need to be there, and they are willing to pay that extra, right? That is something that we are definitely going to see. 3PL has been a large occupier. I think they will continue to be the same because they give a lot of flexibility to companies, a lot. But even within 3PL, we think that there will be a shift towards a 4PL or a 5PL, where it is not just about infrastructure or just not about the easy operations that they help the companies with. I mean, in the last a couple of years, we've seen companies which have said, I need IT solutions along with space solutions in the warehouse. I need somebody to help me maximize my space, give me an idea, or help me with a study that tells me how do I maximize my inward and outward movement of material.
Right.
So it's not going to be limited to 3PL, 4PL or 5PL that we see in European or Asian countries will definitely happen. And that will happen with the entrance of new players like Mapletree or your ESR or, Blackstone, all of these guys coming in, or specialized warehousing developers coming into India from the rest of the world. They are going to drive the change.
Right.
So I think in a nutshell, this is something that we will see. There are a lot more changes that's going to happen, but I think these are the most significant that I can think of.
That makes sense.
Bhavna, if we were to just take a step back and for the benefit of our listeners, explain, like you said, 3PL, right? Which stands for third-party logistics companies that take care of the logistics and, delivery kind of warehousing for other service companies, maybe, or other product delivering companies. So what has been the role that third-party logistics has played in the growth and adoption of warehousing in India? Has it been really pivotal to it?
Yes, it has, Yash. Because today, if you look at our absorption trend, almost 30% of our overall absorption is by 3PL companies.
Right.
3PL and logistic companies. So they have been quite instrumental. Also because they give a lot of flexibility to companies, the end users. Today, like you have a large warehouse of a lakh square feet, but I need only 50,000. The owner says that I don't want to give it to two people, I want to give it to a single person. So that's when the 3PL company comes in, they give a 50,000 box to one occupier and another 50,000 to another occupier, right? Plus, they give a lot of a la carte services, like they provide labor, they provide transportation, some of them provide even IT infrastructure for scanning of your goods, what is coming in, what's going out. So they actually do a lot. So they are also constantly innovating and are happy to provide services as required by the occupiers. But the space is very, very competitive, extremely competitive space.
Understood. And Bhavna, I think since we're covering so many different angles about warehousing, I think we would be remiss if we didn't ask you, how can retail investors get access to an asset class like warehousing?
Yeah. So finally, after a lot of efforts by all market participants, REITs have become a reality. At least office REITs have become a reality, which means that today an investor with a surplus capital of even as low as 20,000, 30,000 rupees can invest.
Right.
We will see warehouse and industrial REITs very soon. That is bound to happen. So that's one way retail investors can participate in this sector. Plus, a lot of strata sales or a strata ownership, right? Bombay has been pioneer in strata ownership. You have people, friends and family from a community own a warehouse and then enjoy the proceeds. You make an SPV, you transfer the asset into that SPV and then have shareholding in that. And even cities like Bangalore and Hyderabad is now beginning to witness that, where you have like 4 or 5 people own a single asset,
Right.
20% each, where one person takes the lead of managing it, and then you enjoy the benefits that come from it. So I think these are two ways in which retail investors can definitely participate.
Perfect. And I think you preempted and kind of answered a little bit of my next question as well, which was that we've seen fractional ownership companies becoming quite large.
Right.
So I just wanted to ask you, what do you think the role of fractional ownership, or like you said, strata ownership, will be to make this, to democratize warehousing investments, because it's something with a large ticket size and a little more complex, right?
Yes, yes. So they give a good opportunity to owners who really have an ambition to own like a warehouse or an office space, right?
Right.
They have been quite uh, uh, instrumental in putting a process together of how do you do it, right? They make an SPV where everything is transparent. Today you can go and audit the reports. Anything that you need to understand, they provide it. So they have been quite instrumental, and I think increasingly with the demand for ownership, also fractional ownership going up, we would see more and more acquisitions happen by strata ownership companies.
That certainly makes sense. Bhavna, taking a step back over here, I wanted to take a break from our conversation about warehousing and ask you about real estate valuation. Could you give us a quick overview of commercial real estate valuation and maybe the different approaches used to value real estate in India?
I'm sure it's a topic very close to my heart. I have a RICS certification in valuation, and I absolutely love it when somebody talks about valuations. Um, so yes, so commercial valuations have come a long way. In fact, 2007 when I had joined Cushman, my first valuation was for the Ascendas REIT. From then to now, I see what we actually read in books is now being put into action, and it's reality today. Like a small thing like a sinking fund for replacement of assets. 2007-8, all our buildings were new, and nobody could fathom that why is it that we need to have a sinking fund, because my building is new. What could go wrong in 10 years, 12 years, or 15 years?
Right.
But now we see that today you need to replace the DGs, you need to upgrade your lifts, you need to redo your lobbies. A lot of capex will actually go in the upkeep and maintenance of a older building, because today a lot of grade A assets are like now 15 years old, right? So they really need a lot of upkeep and maintenance.
Right.
So in valuation, we used to always keep aside a sinking fund for this, and not everybody was happy with it, because which meant that your bottom line was coming down. But now everybody realizes that yes, that is necessary. You need to have a sinking fund for replacing assets, right? So things like that, a lot of theoretical knowledge is now being put into practice, but largely you can divide valuation processes into three. One is the cost approach. The second is the comparison or sales comparison approach, and third is the income approach.
Right.
Okay. So the cost approach says that the value of your property is equivalent to the cost that is required to replace that property today. So what we do is we assess what is the cost of land, what could be the cost of building. We depreciate it. If it's an older building, you will depreciate the cost of the building.
Right.
Right? And you add a profit margin to it as to what could be your margin in getting that asset ready. Yeah, margin for your efforts and your equity and all of that. And then the value that you get to it is the value of the property.
Right.
Right? So that is one method of valuation, and this method we largely use for an asset class like warehousing, where there is lack of comparables. So I'll move to the second method, where it's comparative method, right? So you say that today I have like a lakh square feet office that I want to buy, but I also want to assess what is the value. So you go out and you look for similar sized properties in a similar market,
Right.
and you apply certain premiums and discounts, because India is not a very homogeneous market, right? There are two lanes next to each other who would have a very different neighborhood profile. So a property in an X lane and a property in a Y lane, which is less than 300 meters apart, could have different values. So you go out into the market, you see what's available,
Right.
and as a valuer, because you have an experience in assessing that what is my premium. So you apply certain premiums and discounts and come to a value of the property.
Right.
So that's what you do in a sales comparison method, where lot of comparatives are available. When it is not available, then we most often than not look at our income method of valuation, where we determine what is the income potential of this asset over a period of time.
Right.
We assess the income potential. We deduct all the expenses that could come with it, like property taxes, insurance, if there are any brokerages that you have to pay, all of that, you deduct that, and then you do a discounted cash flow method to arrive at a present value of the property.
Right.
So this is done mostly for income yielding assets, because again, today my asset may be leased at a sub market rate because it is a 10-year-old lease, right?
Right.
A lot of times people do an average of all three.
Okay.
Or as a valuer, you take a call saying that this is the reason why I think we should go for a replacement method, or this is the reason why I should go for a income method. That as a valuer, you take a call and you justify that.
Right. That makes sense.
Bhavna, just to clarify one thing for our listeners, like you said, the income approach for any income earning property, the logic behind this valuation essentially becomes finding the present value of all this cash flow that you're going to be getting over a lot of time from this property, right?
That's right.
Perfect. Another angle that we wanted to cover and get your opinion on was real estate as an investment, as an asset class for young investors. We're seeing, especially since REITs and InvITs have been introduced in India, a lot more people have been interested in real estate as an indirect investment as well. So, what would your advice be for a young investor looking to explore real estate as an asset class today? What kind of products should they look at? How can they get started? And what kind of asset classes maybe have better yields for them?
Actually, I have a few thoughts on this. I would divide my the buyer segment into two categories.
Okay.
One is a high risk category, the other is a low risk category. I am a firm believer of risk analysis.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So if somebody is at a high risk category, they actually care more about capital appreciation than the yield, because the yield will not be dramatically different than what my fixed deposit is giving, right? But I can take risks.
Right.
Then I would go with buying something like a plot. And companies have also realized that today young investors do have surplus income. So earlier, the plot sizes in a city like Bangalore would be like a 2,400 square feet or a 4,000 square feet plots, right? But now they're bringing it down to 1,200, which makes the overall capital value more affordable. So that somebody who is young, who's had 3-4 years of work experience, has saved money, they can buy an asset class like that.
Right.
Apartment buying is somewhere in between. Somebody who looks at a blended kind of a rate, because you do get capital appreciation, at the same time you will get a yield of, let's say, 2 or 3%. So somebody who's in between, right? It's not a high risk, but at the same time, does not want the low risk as well. Wants to be somewhere in between. So they would probably go for an apartment. And again, sensing the demand, a lot of developers have now started launching a 1 BHK kind of a apartment project in southern markets, which was never heard of.
Right.
So that is another way of looking. But somebody who is just trying to figure out or is trying to place into this real estate sector, doesn't really want to own an asset, is somebody who is a big fan of liquidity, is somebody who wants to invest in smaller ticket sizes, then they can definitely look at REITs, office REITs, because they are assets which are 90%, 95% leased.
Right.
You have AAA rated tenants, you have it's liquid. Tomorrow you need the money, you can just sell it, you can get out. So it provides a lot of benefits. So somebody who wants liquidity and low risk can definitely look at this segment to invest.
Perfect. We were speaking to a couple of our guests earlier about real estate kind of being a male-dominated industry and increasing the participation of women in real estate in general. So, as the founder of a real estate company, I wanted to kind of get your views on this and also perhaps ask you what we could do to reduce this gender gap in real estate in India.
Right. So it's a question that I get asked a lot.
Right.
Being a female entrepreneur in real estate, people do ask me this because my board consists of like 4 men and I'm the only woman in the board.
Right.
Right. But yeah, uh, as address advisors, we believe in equality, and therefore our proportion of female to male ratio is quite high. And I think like women do brilliantly. Like when I see my team, the girls in my team are so good, right? They're so brilliant with what they bring to the table. It's just about educating maybe colleges or educating parents and letting them know that real estate is also a career.
Right.
Today, when you talk about career option to parents, they will think of their kids becoming a doctor or an engineer or a graphic designer, but they will never think of real estate.
Right.
So this is something that we continuously do. We educate people around us of the benefits that this industry gives, right? There is no industry that is as challenging as this. Every deal is so different, every client is so different. It's so exciting. There is no monotony. And plus, I think women bring a lot of balance because of the empathy that we bring. The kind of multitasking we can do, I don't think anybody else can do, right? So we have so many gifts that we bring to the table, and increasingly that's I think like people are seeing it, because when you see a success story, one success story drives another success story, and that the whole link is formed, right? So we advocate having more girls and women in our team, and I hope that everybody else also realizes and does the same.
Perfect. I think that brings us to the end of our questions, Bhavna. I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and giving us your time. I think Akshay and I and our listeners also are going to learn a lot from this conversation.
I couldn't agree more with what Yash has said. So thank you so much, Bhavna.
I absolutely enjoyed our conversation, and thank you so much for having me. It's been really nice chatting with you.
If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow Concrete Conversations on Instagram to know more about upcoming episodes and for some behind the scenes content.
For more deep dives into the world of Indian real estate, stay tuned for more Concrete Conversations.